Okay, so today we're just going to do a nice little overview of the entire class, and then we're going to talk about, first off, we're going to do some introductions and then talk about the exam format, and then dive into a little bit of what each section is like, what each essay covers, and some tips for writing all of them. And then I'm going to touch on the importance of annotation, which I know is not everyone's favorite thing to do, but it is super important for this class. So we're going to talk about how to do that in a way that's beneficial to you and so it doesn't feel like a chore. And then finally, I'm going to do some tips for analyzing poems and then close out with some of your survey questions. So to introduce myself, my name is Gayatri. I am a freshman in college. So I go to Vanderbilt University, that's in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm studying child development and chemistry. I want a minor in English, and at the moment, I want to be a doctor, but we will see if my mind changes over the next 4 years. I love music. I love every music genre. Right now, I really like the 1975, Fleetwood Mac, Wallows, J. Cole. I love The Strokes. I thought their new album was really good. But if anyone ever wants to chat about music, I will definitely be down. Hi, Madeline. We're just doing some intros. So I love reading. I actually genuinely do enjoy it. Just don't really have the time because my schedule is super busy. But right now I'm reading The Handmaid's Tale. And I'm going to be your AP Lit TA this semester. So what that means is I'm going to be around in the Slack channel to answer your questions about the class, about analyzing books, anything to do with literature. But you can always DM me if you need help with anything else. I'm here as your advocate, so I'd like to support you in any way I can. So I have a ton of icebreakers here. So I was thinking if y'all are comfortable, it would be nice for everyone to get to know each other a little. So if y'all can hop it in the chat, you can turn on your videos, you can turn them off. I don't care. You can unmute yourself if that's what you're comfortable with. Don't want to put anyone out of their comfort zone, but if everyone could just answer one icebreaker if they're comfortable, I think that'd be nice. And I'll start. I will do my favorite fairy tale as a kid. I really liked Goldilocks, except for the part about the pores. That always sounded really gross to me, but I like the story, so that was definitely my favorite. So if anyone else wants to unmute themselves and just do an icebreaker.
I can do one.
Oh, cool.
Right off the bat, towards the bottom, the one bullet, if you could live in the universe of any one TV show or movie, what would it be and why? Maybe this is because I just rewatched it for the third time, but the Vampire Diaries or the originals, that entire universe, for sure. I love every character on the show, so I would like to meet them. So yeah, Damon.
That's an answer.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to say something? If y'all are typing in the chat, I can't see, but you can totally do that if you're comfortable with it. No one else wants to do an icebreaker? Are you sure? This is a totally judgment-free zone.
I'll do it. Okay. My favorite fairy tale as a kid was Cinderella. And right now my nails are even Cinderella blue. So.
Oh my god, my toenails are Cinderella blue. That's funny. All right. Okay. Anyone else? Nope. All right. I'm going to move on and we can come back to this at the end if anyone wants to. All right. So I have a little QR code right here for the College Board AP Lit section. So if y'all want to scan this and follow along with some of the documents that I'm going to be talking about and some of the rubrics I'm going to be talking about, you can scan the QR code right now. You can also just Google AP Lit College Board. It's the first link that pops up. It has the past exams, the course and exam description, some rubrics, things like that. So if you want to follow along, feel free to do so. But for starters, the 2021 exam is going to assess mastery of the entire course. So unlike last year's AP exams that were kind of shortened because of the pandemic, this is going to be spanning all of AP Lit, so every unit. And the format of that is 55 multiple choice questions. So those are going to be just under half of your exam score, and you have an hour to do that. and then you have 3 written essays, and these aren't like paragraph essays like SAQs. They are full-length essays. So you're looking at 3 to 5 paragraphs at least, but ideally I think 4 is a good number. If you can get a conclusion, great, we'll talk about that. But you're gonna have 3 hours to write all your essays. Keep in mind that with your essays, for 2 of them you do have, so I'll talk about that in a second. So you have your poetry analysis, your prose analysis, and your student chosen book essay. So for the first 2, you are going to have an accompanying passage that you're going to have to read, respond to. So there isn't a reading period incorporated specifically for you to read those passages and get an understanding before you write your essays. You just have the 3 hours. And so it's important that you take the initiative to pace yourself and make sure you're not spending too much time like annotating or too deeply analyzing the passage, so you do have time to write a strong essay. And your Q3 essay is the one that I know a lot of you guys are really scared about, but we're going to talk about how to conquer it and make it totally doable. So that is your student chosen book essay. And so you're going to be presented with like an idea or a theme to respond to, rather than being given a passage and then analyzing like literary elements or figurative language and things like that. So your exams are going to be on paper, in person. So they're going to be like traditional AP exams before 2020, if any of y'all took AP exams back then. But in the event that safety calls for it, College Board is fully prepared to move your exams online. However, if exams do get moved online, they are not going to be shortened like they were this past year. They are going to be full length. You will do all of your multiple choice questions and all 3 of your essays. So be prepared for all of those. And finally, your exam is going to be May 5th, 2021, which is super far away, at 8 a.m. In your local time. Okay, so for starters, your multiple choice section is 55 questions long, and it's an hour. So that you would think warrants you a little over a minute a question, but actually you do have 5 passages to read and then respond to. So you really do have under a minute a question. So it's really important that when you are reading your passages, you are paying attention and picking out what's important, so you're able to answer those questions in a timely fashion and you don't run out of time. So that does come with practice. So it's cool that's super early on in the year and you guys will gain those skills to be able to do those on time. So if that sounds intimidating, I promise you it's totally doable. A little more about that. So this is just taken from the College Board website's description. So multiple choice is 55 questions, 1 hour, 45%, like I said. Your 5 passages will have 8 to 13 questions per set, depending on the difficulty of the passage, the relevance of what they want to test you on, etc. You will definitely have prose fiction, drama, or poetry. Those are all fair game. From my experience, most of the practice exams I took, as well as the one we had to take preceding AP Literature last year, I didn't actually take the full exam because of the whole coronavirus thing, but the practice sets that I have seen will always include at least a poetry and prose fiction, and usually multiples of those, and sometimes there's drama that is fair game, but not necessarily always, but you will definitely see poetry and prose. Like they said, that's going to be at least 2 each, so your very last one is up for grabs a little bit. I just have a couple sample questions here to show you. Your multiple choice questions aren't going to be necessarily like the ones you might have seen in previous English classes. For example, if we're looking at question 51 here, it doesn't ask you to identify the literary device. It does give it to you, which is nice, but it's asking you to do something a little more complex with it. It's asking you to describe its function, its effect, and that takes a little bit of a deeper understanding of literature than you might have been traditionally used to. So definitely we want to practice so you can develop those skills. Okay, so after your multiple choice is over, you get a little break, and then we are on to your very first essay, and that is going to be poetry analysis. So College Board calls this a literary analysis of a given poem, and it is just about 18% of your total score. You really want to aim your essay writing portion to be around 35 to 40 minutes because you want to make sure you have time for reading your passage for Q2, writing your Q3 essay, and writing your Q2 essay after this. So try not to spend too much time. This is the very first essay that's presented to you, so it's really easy to kind of feel like, oh, I have so much time, I'm going to spend a lot of time right here, but do be mindful of that. So I have a sample prompt right here. So this is what your essay might look like. You have not too specific of a prompt, but they do give you a little direction here. You have your poetry, and then if you notice right here at the end, they actually do give you a little context, and that might be useful when you're framing your essay. So kind of use all the information they give you to your benefit, and if you can find a reason to incorporate background information to strengthen your essay, definitely do that. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the prompt itself. So your prompt, like I said, is always going to have some minimal background information. You see a little bit right here, it says read all of seniors 2005 poem plans. So that tells you a little bit about the year. At the very end, it told you a little bit about the context of the poem and where it was. If any of you have taken AP Lang, you might remember that we use the background information a lot to inform our audience. In a similar fashion, you can use the background information to help inform your introduction and to really set the stage for your essay. So don't neglect the little blurb they give you at the beginning and any information they give you at the end. If you can find a way to use it for your benefit and to really strengthen your analysis, you should definitely do that. All right, so the next tip I have is they ask for a well-organized essay, and that isn't gonna just take one shape. So you really don't want to make your organization super boring. You don't want to do in this paragraph I'm going to discuss metaphor. In this paragraph I'm going to discuss allusion. And the last one I'm going to discuss ace in a tin. You don't want to do it like that. That's a really boring essay to read. And frankly, it's not a very strong analysis. You're kind of just identifying and expanding rather than analyzing the work as a whole, which is what they want you to do. So you want your paragraphs to be idea-based. So maybe in one paragraph you talk about love. You want it to be idea-based. And with that comes writing topic sentences of ideas. So rather than saying the speaker uses this figurative device in this paragraph, say something much broader, make a statement, say oftentimes love isn't easy. Okay, that's not a very strong topic sentence, but I hope that demonstrates the difference between idea-based and a very fact-based pulled from the text. And the second topic sentence gives way for a much more interesting essay, and I can weave in those figurative devices I've identified. I can weave in how metaphor amplifies that idea, or I can weave in why the author chose to use a certain meter or rhyme scheme to stress what they're trying to say. And that can all fit under my idea, but it just makes for a much more interesting and more complex, sophisticated essay. Does that make sense? All right, cool. The next thing here is that the prompt does ask you to assess complex relationships. So you want, like I said before, you want your response to be a little deeper than just identifying literary elements. So for us, what that really means is you don't want to be stating there is metaphor. All right, you don't want to be stating there is metaphor here. That really isn't doing anything. Your reader does know there is metaphor. They are experienced readers. They're not going to gain anything from that. What they want is an analysis of any literary elements that you might find. You want to find a way to use the literary elements that you can identify and connect them to what idea the prompt is asking about, if that makes sense. So like I said, you want to explain the function. You want to say the usage of the metaphor here exemplifies this idea, or it makes this connection. It allows the reader to understand this. And another tip is you really don't want to say, I think, or anything that shows like doubt or detaches yourself from your analysis. It's really important to be confident in your analysis. So if you think that the metaphor allows the reader to be to better understand the relationship between father and son, say this metaphor shows the relationship between the father and son in a blah, blah, blah way, instead of saying, I think this. That kind of detaches the analysis from your voice, and it also makes you seem almost doubtful instead of very strong and confident in your essay. And you really want to come off confident because you are right, most likely. We'll talk about that, but the way literature works, you probably will not be wrong in your analysis as long as you can find evidence to back it up. So if you're maybe interpreting a poem differently from your peers, that doesn't mean you're wrong. If you can find facts here, means like quotes or elements in the text that do align with the analysis you're making, then you are correct. So there's never really a correct. There are lots of corrects. What is wrong is when your analysis has no support from the text. As long as your analysis is defensible, you aren't wrong. So please do be confident in what you're writing. By the time you get to your essay, you will have been in lit for a year. You definitely do know what you're doing. So please don't doubt yourself. And then the very last note I want to make here is this prompt just does touch on some literary techniques. It does say syntax, diction, figurative language, but your prompt may not do that. So one thing that's really important is to not always rely on the guidance that the prompt may give you, just because you don't know what your exam is going to look like specifically. And branching off of that, just because your prompt does present you with certain techniques, that's not an exhaustive list. You don't have to use only syntax, diction, and figurative language. You don't have to use those at all. And those aren't the only ones that are in the text for sure. So really pick out, when you're doing your analysis, your annotations, whatever stands out to you and you think is useful in your essay, use that, even if it's not listed as a possible technique. All right, so here is the scoring rubric for poetry analysis, your Q1. So all the essay rubrics do look pretty similar, but I'm going to be a little more comprehensive in going over this one with you because it's the first one. So the very first thing they ask you for is a thesis. And notice that you don't get a point if your thesis isn't defensible, if it's a restation of the prompt, or if it's just a summary without a claim. Also, your thesis has to respond to the prompt. But what's really important here is that your thesis has to be defensible. It has to make sense for the question. So you really want to make sure that when you're formulating a thesis, you can back it up with evidence, and you can back it up with enough evidence to write a whole essay. You might find a small aspect of the text that you think, okay, like I can generate a thesis from this, but if you can't make a convincing essay out of it, if you can't write at least 2 body paragraphs about that, then you're not going to really have a strong essay, and your thesis really just isn't going to be that defensible. So keep that in mind. And on the flip side, you do get points when your thesis is defensible and responds to the prompt. So that is what you really want to do. The next way you can get your points, moving on from that thesis point, is your evidence and your commentary. So evidence is going to be what you pull directly from the text. It's going to be quotes. It's going to be literary devices that you identify, rhyme scheme, things like that. That's what you pull directly from what you're given. Your commentary is your response to it. It's your analysis of those elements of the evidence. So as an example, when we're talking about not just saying, I found a metaphor, but rather saying the function of this metaphor is, or the use of this metaphor here leads to whatever, that is commentary. The evidence is identifying the metaphor, but your commentary is the way that you connect your evidence to your argument. So your commentary takes the evidence that you found and bridges the gap between your thesis and your evidence that you found. It shows why your evidence is at all relevant to the point you're trying to make, if that makes sense. And so what they really want is specific evidence that supports all of your claims, and it has a line of reasoning. So that means that your jump from your evidence to your commentary and to your thesis, it can't be counterintuitive. It has to make sense. Like you can't just make things up for the sake of writing your essay. It does have to follow a reasonable pattern. And if you do that and you do explain how your literary techniques contribute to the poem's meaning, you will get your points. So that is ideally how you write your essay. And the very last point, notice that you do have to get this point to get a perfect score on your essay, is the sophistication point. And the sophistication point is what they're really looking for after you've done the thesis, the evidence, and the commentary. So on top of all of that, your sophistication point is given when you demonstrate complex thought or complex literary argument. So you want to identify the broader context of the poem. And something that can help you inform that is actually your background information. So that could be a great way to weave that in here. Something else you want to do is say, this is how I interpreted this poem. Here's another way I see it could be interpreted. You really want to write persuasively. You want to write with colorful language. You want to identify complexities in the poem. So that means things that may not necessarily mesh with each other, and then expand on that. And these are always for you to show sophistication in your writing and for you to earn that point. I will say that this is not a difficult point to, or this is a difficult point to earn. It is not going to be easy for you, especially at first, because it requires mastery of all the other elements. When you're good at row A, you know how to write a strong thesis. You're going to get to writing strong evidence and strong commentary. And once you've mastered all of that, you will be able to be comfortable with writing sophisticatedly, but that only comes with mastery of the first two rows. So don't be at all frustrated if you find this point difficult to get. It is not meant to be easy. Like I said, that point is kind of the cherry on top of your perfect score. And what's really important here, what makes up the bulk of your score, is going to be your thesis, your evidence, and your commentary. So focus on that. And if you can find it in yourself, in your writing, if you're comfortable writing in a sophisticated manner or identifying one of these elements, then that's great. You can get that final point. But what you really should be focusing on is strong evidence, strong commentary, and a defensible thesis. So just some tips for success. You want to familiarize yourself with the rubric, because that is basically what they're grading you on. So if you know what they're asking for, you know how to write. Another thing is that students find poetry really daunting. Please don't let poetry scare you. It really is just prose written in a different format. And so don't let that fear of, okay, Q1 is the poetry essay that's going to be more difficult than the other ones. Don't psych yourself out. You can totally do it. Another tip, like I said, is identifying the effects of figurative language instead of just identifying that they're there. Another thing is you want to annotate in a way that makes the text easier for you. So maybe we'll touch on this a little more later with annotations. I'll actually hold off on that. And the final thing I want to say is try and come up with possible themes or theses while you're reading the poem. So as you identify different elements, different literary techniques, different ideas throughout the poem, you don't have to be writing down theses or themes or anything like that while you're reading the poem, but kind of have it going in the back of your mind, trying to understand how all of these ideas connect to the broader meaning of the poem. And if you think like that while you're reading the poem, writing the essay is going to be a lot easier. All right, so moving on to your second essay, this is your prose fiction argument. So as you can see, you are going to be presented with, I actually cut off the bottom part of this passage, but it is going to be a 1 to 2 page passage. It will be either like a book excerpt, a drama excerpt, maybe an excerpt from a short story. It's going to be some sort of prose. And it will probably be a little bit difficult. It might not be a super easy, an excerpt from a super easy book, because they do want you to identify complexity. So this might be a struggle area for people who struggle with reading comprehension, but it definitely is not unconquerable, just like the rest of this exam. So like I said, it might be a drama excerpt, and it is just like Q1, about 18% of your exam score. And again, when you're writing, after you've read and annotated your passage, you really want to allow 35 to 40 minutes of pure writing time, just so you make sure you have time for Q3. Okay, so we're going to look a little deeper at this prompt. So the prompt gives you a little bit of background on the novel, and then it asks you to read the passage carefully, and then in a well-written essay, analyze how Hawthorne portrays the narrator's attitude towards Zenobia throughout the use of literary techniques. So, starting off, you want to pay attention to the broader context that the excerpt is taken from. Usually these are excerpts from books or short stories or dramas, things that have more to them than just the passage you're reading. And so if you pay attention to the broader context they give you at the beginning, it might help make some of the confusing parts of the passage sense. They might make a little more sense if you know who the characters are, what the relationships are to each other. But if you have read the work that the excerpt is taken from, they only want you to respond to the passage they're given, that you're given on the exam. So let's say they pick a passage from your favorite book and you know exactly what happens after the scene ends. That is not fair game for your essay. It will not help your essay. It actually is not what they want at all, because they're asking you to analyze just this one excerpt. So even if you do have additional knowledge of the entire book, please don't quote from there or pull scenes or events from there, because they really just, that's not what they're asking you to do. But like I said, the broader context that they give you at the beginning can help you understand a little bit more of what's happening in the passage, since you're given such a short excerpt. So they do ask you to identify and analyze the use of literary techniques. So when you're reading the passage and you identify these literary techniques, try and think about the function. Think about what each is adding to the text and why they're there. Why did the author choose to add this metaphor? Why did the author choose this simile? What is the point here? Because authors don't do those mindlessly. Nobody throws in allusion. Nobody accidentally writes 6 words that begin with B. That's not how writing works. And so all of these are purposeful, and they do have an impact. So you want to try and identify, or at least make an inference, a hypothesis about why the author might choose to include each literary device. And then finally, College Board is asking you for a well-written essay. That means that your essay cannot be elementary to get all those points. So while you are only given a short passage, you're not given that much volume to analyze, and I am aware of that, but you still want to try and find nuances in the text that you can expand upon in your writing. You want a complex thesis, you want to write with confidence. Like I said, you want to write sophisticatedly if you can. And going along with that confidence, please don't worry about, like I said, if your analysis is wrong. Make sure your analysis has ample support and that you use evidence in your essay. And that is how you write a strong essay. It's not really going to be about writing the same analysis that every other student comes up with. It's about finding nuances in the text and really understanding what you're reading, and then being able to articulate that in a very supported fashion. So the rubric for this looks very similar to the rubric for Q1. So they do want a defensible thesis. They want for your evidence and commentary to be specific and relevant and support your claims and to have that line of reasoning there. They really want an explanation of your evidence and show how, they want you to show how your evidence is supportive of your argument. And they do want you to analyze more than one literary element or technique in terms of the meaning of the passage. And once more, they are asking for your sophistication to come from some sort of complexity or tension that you identify, analyzing the work. You'll hear this a little later on, but analyzing the work in a broader context, meaning of the work as a whole, rather than just in the context of your exam or just the excerpt you've given. And once again, this doesn't mean that you talk about the theme of the book as a whole if you've already read the book. Let's say the excerpt is from The Catcher in the Rye and you've already read that book and you kind of know the real theme and why that book, like the context of that book broadly. That's not necessarily what they're asking for here, because that is unfair. What they're asking for is, with what you're given, identify or interpret the meaning in a broader context. And another way you can get that point is just like before, an alternate interpretation or writing very persuasively and vividly. For success, you definitely want to, just like we said before, familiarize yourself with the rubric. I'll get that word right sometime. And just like before, you want a supported thesis. You don't want to shy away from the prompt. You do want to write about just what they're asking for, even if you get excited by the prompt or the passage. And you do want to incorporate direct quotes from the text. And that does not mean lengthy sentences that you verbatim take from the text. It means short, 1 word, 2 words, 3 words, just short little scraps of the text that you weave into your sentences. You don't want your quote to be your sentence. So you might say the author describes the trees as green. But like you would put green in quotes. But I really hope that that it's a little deeper than that. But instead of saying the exact quote from the passage, which might be the trees are green, does that make sense? Where you're just quoting that one specific part and using your words for the rest. That's really how your quotes will flow in your writing. It's really disruptive to your writing if you have a big old quote written in a different style in the middle of your passage or in the middle of your essay. It doesn't really add much. It's actually kind of distracting. So it is much better to weave those in by using shorter quotes. But do make sure that if you are quoting directly, you use quotation marks. You do not have to cite line numbers or author names or anything like that. Just simple quotes will do. And then just once more, you do want to be really confident in your analysis because I promise you, you are correct. And your final essay is the student chosen text. So this is my favorite essay. I think it's really fun to write. So you are given a much broader prompt because unlike your previous 2 essays, which were based off a passage that College Board chose, and they based the prompt off of it, this is a lot more general so that it can be applied to any book of your choice or any epic. I think you can even write a play. Yeah, you can write from a play too. So they really want this quote or this prompt to be something that can be applied to any book, and you can write a strong essay about pretty much anything that is of comparable literary merit, as they say. So what that means is you cannot be writing about the Magic Tree House or like Percy Jackson. Any of the young adult books that y'all might read for entertainment usually aren't the best choices here. You really want to write an essay on a book that requires a lot of thought from your side to analyze. And that's not to say that you have to write exhaustively from this list that they give you. You definitely don't. But you want to make sure that the book you choose is on the same level, more or less, as to something you might find on here. So like, for example, this list has King Lear on it. That's a great play, but not everyone reads King Lear. Maybe you've read Romeo and Juliet, or maybe Hamlet, maybe you read Julius Caesar. And those are all more or less the same level. So it is a good idea for you to write about one of those if you're comfortable with them instead of King Lear. So please don't look at this book and this list and be like, I read that book in 4th grade and it is on this list, so College Board is going to want me to write about it. No, they want you to write about a book that you know you're comfortable with. And so don't stress too much about your choice. The books that y'all read throughout the year really will be books that you can write essays about. They are going to be of comparable literary merit. So don't agonize over what book you're choosing. Make sure it's a book you're familiar with and you're going to be able to write a strong essay on. So that's really what matters here. The merit usually just takes care of itself. But if anyone wants maybe like a list of book recommendations aside from the list that you guys see on here, I can totally do that for you if you guys want to read some books in preparation for the exam. So just like every other essay, it's going to be 18%. And just a quick note here, there is no rule saying you have to write them in the order Q1, Q2, Q3. You write them in the way you're most comfortable. And a tip that I think is really useful is whichever essay you think will be most difficult it might be good to write that first, get it out of the way, and then feel really good about your next 2 essays. And if you think that that's a strategy that might work for you, then it's totally cool to write this essay first. Do whatever works for you. This is your exam. And so please don't feel bound by the numbers. So just to break down this prompt a little bit, like I said, this prompt is going to be vague, but College Board still does expect a really complex essay from you. And so what that really means is you can't write about a book that you don't know much about just because you think it's an impressive book. Maybe you've heard, maybe you see a book on the list, or maybe you think that, okay, well, Jane Eyre is known to be a really tough book. If I write about Jane Eyre and analyze it, I'm going to come off a lot more impressive. Well, if you don't know the story, then you're not. It doesn't matter. Choose a simpler book if you're more comfortable with it. What it really comes down to is your ability to take the very vague prompt you're given and propose a complex argument. And so that comes from familiarity. Yep. Another idea here is they ask you to identify something about the meaning of a work as a whole. So if you recall, in the previous 2 rubrics, we talked about really quickly about the purpose of the text in a broader context. So that relates to this idea of a meaning of the work as a whole. My lit teacher always called it the MOAU. And it's sort of like the theme. And I want to say really quickly, your theme is not a word. Your theme is never going to be happiness or love or difficulty or any adjective or noun that you can find. That is not a theme. Your theme is a statement, and it's going to look a little bit like a moral lesson. If y'all remember when we read like fairy tales as a kid, there would always be that kind of little moral of the story at the end. You know, like good things come to those who take time, or those really like cliche sort of, those are more of what a real theme looks like. So you are going to, obviously yours is going to be more complex than like an idiom, but the idea here is that your theme is not just one word. And with that, your MOAU is not just going to be one word. When you identify the meaning of the work as a whole, you want to incorporate the complexity from the book and phrase it in a broader context. So that comes again with understanding of the book. So you're not going to be able to come up with a good MOAU unless you are familiar with the book and all elements of it. So please don't choose a book you've read halfway through, because that is not going to be successful at all. So you really, really, really want to choose a book you're comfortable with. And I promise you, if you choose a book that you know well, you will do well on this essay. And one last thing, your MOAU here is actually referring to the work as a whole rather than in your Q2, for example, when it is referring to just the passage as a whole. And so because you are expected to be familiar with your book, they do expect that your MOAU be a little more specific and a little more, I don't want to say correct, but a little more nuanced and appropriate for the book, because you do know the broader context here. So I'm going to go over this really quickly, and then I'm going to pause for questions because I've been talking for a really long time and I want to make sure everyone is on the same page. So really quickly, okay, the scoring rubric for this is going to look a little different slightly because you don't have the book right in front of you, but for the most part, it is going to be the same. You are going to still need a thesis that presents a defensible interpretation. And notice here they said of the selected work, because it isn't going to be the same for everyone. I'm sorry. And just like before, you want to make sure that you have specific, relevant evidence that supports your claims and that your commentary does respond to it in a way that shows how your line of reasoning is supported by the evidence and contributes to your interpretation of the book. And once more, you can earn that sophistication prompts by talking about some complexities, tensions, identifying the broader context of the work, the meaning of the work as a whole. This will be easier for y'all because you will be able to read the book ahead of time and identify a MOAU. So kind of get to cheat a little here, which is really nice for y'all. And then once more, just by identifying and expanding a little bit on those alternative interpretations and writing persuasively can also earn you your sophistication point. So like I said, don't worry too much about the book you're choosing, and familiarize yourself with the rubric. And something that's really important here is, just like Q1 and Q2, you do want to quote the book. And they don't expect you to have lines from the book memorized. But when you are reading your book, pick out some of those short memorizable quotes. The ones that really pop up throughout the story, or the ones that really kind of summarize the MOAU, or are very directly related to the MOAU, that you can weave into your analysis regardless of what prompt you're given. So you want to pick prompts that represent the book as a whole rather than a specific idea. And those will be super useful because you will be able to put them in your essay regardless of what the prompt is specifically asking for, because they relate to the book, not the prompt, if that makes sense. And so you might not have perfect prompts, perfect quotes with quotation marks. It might not be verbatim, but you do want direct references to the book. So this is going to look a little different for this essay because you don't have the text right in front of you, but you do want to pull your evidence from the book. And this could be as simple as referring to direct scenes in the book rather than referring to the book super broadly, but you do definitely want to show that you have read the book. So that is super important. And going along with the don't worry too much about the book you're choosing, have a few books in your arsenal that you're comfortable with. Bless you. So the books you read throughout the year, will be great books for you to write your essays on. And so while you might have some assigned books that you read as a class, or maybe you're self-studying, maybe your lit teacher doesn't read books with y'all at all, whatever the case may be, make sure you're comfortable with the books that you have with you throughout the year. A good 2 or 3 books should do, because you will be able to write an essay on pretty much everything. And going along with that, your prompts are going to be vague enough that you really can make an essay out of anything. And as an example for y'all, if anyone has ever read Jane Eyre, it is a very 1800s, 1700s Victorian romantic book. It is very different from Native Son, which really touches on racial issues, and it's a much more recent book by Richard Wright. In our Q1, Q3 essay, the very first one we wrote in my lit class was talking about fear, and we had the option to choose from either of those books. So what I really wanted to demonstrate with that point was that they're super different books, but we were able to produce strong essays using either of them for the prompt. So it's not your choice of the book that matters as much as your knowledge of the book, like I've said. And finally, like I said, your short memorizable quotes are a great idea, and they're a really good way to show that you understand and know your book. So before I go on, does anyone have any questions, or does anyone want me to clarify anything? Chat, okay. Okay, sorry, I can't see the chat when I'm talking, so I just saw all these messages, but is the list you showed there the same books for this year? I do not know, because they will give you a list of books on your actual essay. They don't release that ahead of time. So on your Q3 essay, they'll give you a prompt and then followed by a list of books. And that's why that list of books isn't really a good source for you to base your essay off of. The kinds of books that you read throughout the year will be good essays. And if you're struggling with finding the right kind of books to read in preparation for your AP Lit exam, then come to me and I will totally present you with a list of books. Or you can refer to past exam. It depends. I don't want you to overextend yourself with this class, especially if you are, can everyone see the chat? Okay. So I'm answering Madeline's question. It does, if you do have the time and you like reading, go for it, read some extra books, but you don't want to make your life too difficult. And if your AP Lit class is reading some books, I bet that your teacher knows what they're doing, and that the books that you all are reading will be good books for your Q3 essay. And if not, if you aren't reading any, then it really is a good idea to have some books that you are comfortable with. And that doesn't necessarily mean reading new books. If there's anything you've read in the past that you think might be of comparable literary merit, maybe just brushing up on those and kind of analyzing the books instead of just reading them, that can work too. So definitely don't overextend yourself, but be comfortable with books. All right, any other questions? Also, did I answer you guys' questions, or was there something else? Yeah, totally. And that is actually a great book for AP Lit, because I read that for my AP Lit class. But yeah, you could go back and read your notes. That would totally work. Don't feel the pressure to read new books just for the purpose of this exam. And if your notes aren't detailed, you can always go back and like brush up on the book itself. Don't feel the pressure to read new books just for the purpose of this essay. Okay, anyone else? You're welcome. All right, if you guys have any other questions, unmute yourself or throw in the chat and I will check back in there when I can, but I want to continue. So some key takeaways is you really want to be familiar with those rubrics. Something else is that you always want to quote your text and state an explicit MOAL. So if you recall, that was the meaning of the work as a whole. Another thing is, like I said, be confident in your analysis. Something that's really useful for you guys is, and this is off a College Board page that I was talking about, they have student responses for past exam prompts. And in addition to just the student responses, they also show you how the reader responded to them, the AP reader, and why they were given the scores that they were given. And this can be really useful when you are trying to build up your AP Lit writing skills, identifying what worked for other people, what didn't work for other people, what the readers really are looking for, what are some areas of improvement, things like that. They also have rubrics on there if you want to score yourself when you're done reading, have a peer score for you. If anyone ever wants an essay scored, you can just text me or DM me your essay and I can do the scoring for you with the rubric if you'd like that. They're just really great resources for you to build up your skills. Something else that can be really useful is before you sit down and write your actual essay, try and compose a rough thesis and outline. And that doesn't have to be super specific. Just kind of know what you're going to talk about before you do it, because you are only given so much room. And so maybe you can just do like thesis, topic sentence 1, or body paragraph 1, topic sentence 2, body paragraph 2. If you have enough time and you feel like you can make a strong body paragraph 3, that one too. And then your conclusion as well. But a good essay is usually a intro, body paragraph, conclusion. Once again, you really want to utilize the resources that are given to you. So an important one, like I said, is the College Board website, but also Fiveable has great resources on their website. And also you have the support of the Slack channel. So reach out to your peers if you're struggling. Someone can help explain a concept to you or help you edit your essay. You can turn to me, whatever you guys need, but definitely use what's out there to help you succeed. Another thing that you can do to prepare for AP Lit is read. Just the more you read, the more you're going to be comfortable with reading. And you are going to be asked to read on the exam a lot. And so if you are comfortable with reading and analyzing what you're reading, you're going to be more successful. So read as much as possible to allow yourself to be good at analysis. And then finally, like I said, you don't want to just mention and identify literary devices. You want to explain their function and impact on the text. And that really goes a long way in earning you those commentary points that make up the bulk of your essay score. So really quickly, any more questions? I will go on the chat if I can find it. All right, okay, so Something else I want to talk about tonight is the importance of annotation. So annotation is defined super simply. As you can see, it doesn't have any rules. There is no annotation guidelines. I don't know if any of your teachers have ever given you annotation guidelines or asked you to annotate something for a grade. This isn't like that. You're not being graded on the way that you respond to what you're reading. You don't have to highlight, you don't have to paraphrase, you don't have to do it a specific way. The beauty of annotating is that you do it in a way that works for you. And so you want to utilize that tool. Please don't see it as a chore or something that you have to do, because your annotations really are the framework of your essay. And also they will be really useful in responding to those multiple choice questions. So allow yourself to succeed by annotating in a way that's comfortable for you. So whatever that looks like for you, that might be asking yourself little questions off to the side. Maybe it's paraphrasing, maybe it is underlining, making connections, whatever you need to do to make the text decipherable for you, that's what you do. And the most successful ones are what's useful to you. So it doesn't have to look a specific way. Nobody pays attention to them. I don't even think they look at those pages. So it's a tool for your success. And so I encourage you to annotate, but do as little or as much as you feel that you need to. And above all else, you really want to make sure that your annotations help explain the text to you. I know that a lot of my English teachers used to say you want to talk to the text. I think it's a little more appropriate to say that you want to say what you want to explain to yourself what the text is saying, kind of going the opposite way. You want to explain it to yourself. So maybe when you're writing your essay, you can go back and say, hey, identify this metaphor here. I can incorporate that into my essay, things like that. So they really do set up the framework to your essay and to do it in a way that works for you. So a little more about annotation. Why do we annotate? Number one, we want to understand the text. And so when you annotate what's difficult, you are helping yourself understand it. Another one is to explore your thoughts. So as you read something, you can reflect upon it, and not only is that important for your essay, because it kind of helps with that interpretation analysis part of it, it will also help your understanding of literature as a whole. So if you do this throughout the year, you're going to build up those skills that you need to be successful in this exam. It will help you prepare for the essay because you already have this very rough outline and response to your text. And finally, it's going to give yourself confidence because writing down your thoughts really does solidify them and help them make sense. And so when you're writing your essay, you'll have that kind of proof, right, that this analysis makes sense. All right. Very last thing I want to talk about today is poetry analysis. And I know that a lot of you guys were asking about this, so I'm going to give you a tool. But really quickly, before we do that, I just want to say that poetry is just prose with meter and rhythm. It is just a different layout. It is not some unconquerable being. You will get good at analyzing poems, and that does come with practice. So what I want to give you guys today is this mnemonic called TP Fast. And I know I touched on this in the Slack, but I don't know if everyone saw it, so I just thought it would be useful to mention once more. And what that is you identify these elements right here, and I have the acrostic written out for your ease, but the basic idea is you want to start by responding to the title, kind of seeing what that means and what you think it reveals about the text that you're about to read. And then as you go through paraphrasing the poem, identifying any figurative language, the speaker's attitude, also any shifts, so like shifts in tone, shifts in attitude, things like that. And then once you're done with all of that, you want to respond back to the title and kind of see what you think about the title now and what you think it reveals about the text now. And then finally use all that information to help you stage theme. And like I said, there is no wrong. There is usually going to be a general perspective or trend that most students tend to gravitate towards, but you don't have to say what everyone else around you is saying. As long as your analysis is defensible, you are in the clear. And like I said, there are going to be some patterns and trends. So if you can recognize things, if you can kind of recognize common symbols, things like that, colors, for example, red is very used for anger, passion, love, things like that. And those can be useful to employ when you're really stuck. So just keep those in mind, but remember that you aren't wrong. And then just very lastly, I want to answer some of your questions from the survey. So one thing I wanted to say is prior knowledge of AP Lang does not mean you are going to be or you're not going to be successful in this class. I just asked that out of pure curiosity because at my school we have to take Lang before Lit, so I was just curious to see if anyone else had to do it the same way. Once again, the AP exam is going to cover the entire class, and yes, timing on essays can be tricky, but you can combat that by practicing and writing a lot. And once you are comfortable with writing essays, you can try and mimic that test environment. So give yourself those 3 hours, or if you're just doing one essay, then 1 hour, and put aside all distractions and sit there and write your essay. And you will struggle at first, and it's okay. And you will all grow as you practice. So don't beat yourself up for not being as successful at this essay as you want to be, or not finishing on time. It's okay. You are allowed to learn. And so please allow yourself that room. And then one more thing is it can be difficult to avoid just summarizing a text in your essay. And so to allow yourself room to not just summarize, what you want to do is read actively and annotate and find deeper roots in the text. And when you find those things to write about, you're not going to just summarize because you have something else to say. So that's a way to come at that. And then just one more thing, this is kind of the your general essay format. Your intro is going to have your thesis in it, your body paragraphs with your idea-based topic sentences, and time permitting, you will write a conclusion, but this is the least important part of your essay. So if you are just right down to the wire and you don't have time to write out a strong conclusion, a restatement of your thesis will do, but don't write it verbatim. Present it in a way that closes out the essay, but you really don't need a full paragraph here if you don't have time for it. So don't stress about the conclusion. And one more thing, I know a lot of you in the survey were saying how difficult this learning situation has been for you, and it is hard to learn around you when the world's a mess, and I do understand that. And I just wanted to give you guys a little positivity and some tips to get through all of that. First of all, you guys have an amazing community here on Five Bolt. You will, if you are open to it, you will make great friends in Slack and find support. And so please use that to your advantage. It is really reassuring to know that everyone around you is also struggling. And so let yourself find those people to support you. And also make sure that you are balancing your life. I know that many of you are seniors and you are doing college apps and you are also doing your AP classes and your other classes, and then you have your extracurriculars and you want your resume to look good and all of these things. And I understand what that's like, but none of that matters if you don't look after yourself. So make sure you do put aside time to relax every day. And if you guys need any additional support, please don't feel shy. Please, for anything else, it doesn't have to be AVLIT related, but please do reach out to me and I will do whatever I can to help you out. And then I do know that we are in a community of very high achieving people, and it can be easy to feel inferior. You're not. Please don't compare yourself to others. And I know that can be hard, but remember that you are doing the best you, and nobody else is doing you. So you are doing great. One more thing someone asked about is how to be productive when we're learning the way we are. And besides the tips that like Amanda sends out, things like that, something that's really important to note is that productive work comes from you wanting to be productive. And so if you can find it in yourself, find the reason that you want to do well on whatever, you will be productive with it. So look inside if you need to find some motivation. And lastly, please do not overextend yourself. If you need a break, take a break. If you're struggling, it's okay. Please don't feel like you have to be perfect at everything. Just sit back and take care of your mental health sometimes, because that is just as important as anything else. So that is the end of my spiel. I know I've been talking forever, but I hope that was informative. if anyone has questions, feel free to unmute yourself or say them in the chat. I will hang around for a few minutes, but you guys are, I should have said this earlier, you guys could have come and gone anytime. If you felt like you were pressured to stay because I wasn't finished, please don't ever feel that way. If you ever need to go, you can go. That's cool. I will be on here for a couple more minutes if anyone has any questions. And other than that, I hope everyone has a good night. Good to hear. Good night. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I just had a really quick question.
Yeah.
So I just want to like mentally prepare myself for like how many books I have to read this year. Like how many books did you have to read like for your entire?
Okay. So we did Native Son, we did Jane Eyre, we did Beloved, Picture of Dorian Gray. We did one more. Oh, we did Othello. So I think we read 5 books.
Oh.
I really don't think that you do have to read. Bye, guys. I really don't think that you guys have to read that many. I think 3 is a good number, so you can focus on analyzing them and feeling really comfortable with the context of the book and being able to apply the book to any prompt they might throw at you. And also, if there are books that you've read in the past that you feel like would be appropriate for an AP Lit essay, then feel free to use that to your advantage. Don't feel pressured to read a ton of new books this year.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I really hope you guys like this class. It was definitely my favorite in high school because once you do get to reading those books and having those discussions, it's going to be a lot more about moral issues and everything outside of academics, which is really cool in an academic setting. So I really hope you guys like this class. All right. Y'all are free to leave if you guys don't have any questions. I'm just going to hang back in case anyone does. Bye.
Bye.
You too.